Two.
2, 1. Welcome, everyone, to Nationalist Academy. Tom is making a return. PK can't be here tonight. And to kind of update you, Tom, on what has been happening since the second season where you haven't been here, PK,
Yeah.
PK has kind of been like a replacement co-host for you, and the one episode he wasn't here, I had a kind of debate with a civic nationalist person who came on as well. But yeah,
Interesting.
and you've been gone for a while. So instead of a book review, why don't you tell us a bit about like where you've been and what you've been doing?
The guru has been in the wilderness. So what happened was I got really close to getting doxxed, and so I backed off for a little bit. Then when I was coming back in, I just wasn't feeling the vibe. I just wasn't in the mood. I just had reached the point where I had been so fully saturated by the movement that I needed to take some time to reestablish my connection to myself, as both like in a spiritual sense of like, who am I in this world and what am I doing here, as well as in kind of a more just kind of basic, like I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like, I've got to, I have to take that into account. Like I can't live my life as if I'm not here. And so how do I adjust to being who I am now with the movement being part of that, while at the same time, living amongst a multicultural hell? And so the way that I did that was I proceeded to go through a series of very interesting events, including, and what probably started this, and a lot of people on Twitter would know about this, was I dated for a period of time a woman who was Bosnian. Now, Bosnians, as you know, are South Slavs who are Muslims. And so, interestingly enough, this is here I am dating a blonde woman for the first time in my entire life, and she's a Muslim, which was the irony was just killer. That was a really rocky relationship, to say the least. However, it was sufficient for me at that time to finally kind of get over some of my demons from the past, because here's a demon to the present, and oh dear God, it ended because even though her parents drank like fish and they were not like very culturally Muslim, she very much did not like pork. I happen to be a pork fan, as it so happens. I'm a good German. I love my pork. So I like to eat it in various forms. Sausages are huge for me. Bacon I do enjoy, but really sausages are the key. I decided one day I wanted bacon. I bought the bacon. I made the bacon. The bacon started a fucking fight that was so extreme in its intensity for what it was over food. So just simply food that like you just culturally do not like. You've never even tried it. That I was just kind of like, you know what? If this is that important to you, there's the door. Please walk out of it. And so I became single again. And then I went back to doing what I had done and what you guys had known me to do for a long time, which was to just kind of go out at night, every night I could, sleep with people who I didn't necessarily know, or sometimes did know and worked with and then had to deal with afterwards. That went on. I got new jobs. I got like several different jobs through this period of time. I went from the job that I'd had for years to now I'm on call with that job. And then I worked at a credit union. That was really interesting because it turns out credit unions were the German answer to banks, which we could get into later, which is a very interesting story. After I left the credit union because it was crazy and fucking minorities in management, which never ends well. Then I decided, okay, let me go into tech. Finally got the job in tech that I've wanted for a long time, which is as like a hardware technician. Really fun job, and am currently also pursuing like software development, like through one of those coding camps, but really just as a way to force me to make a portfolio, not so much as like I'm looking for skills and they're going to get me a job. No, it's like I need someone to force me to make my portfolio. All those things being the case, I didn't really have time for the movement for a long time. I really don't have time for it now, except I can squeeze it in here and there and like go on late night rants that puts everybody to sleep. But that being the case, I'm back on the podcasting because I'm also going to be making a very normie facing podcast very soon that I will be giving slight hints to people as it becomes more and more popular on iTunes as to who actually is the host of that show.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. The two reasons that I told our watchers while you were gone, I said my best guess is either he went on a vision quest or he was having girl problems. So it looks like it was the latter of the two.
There were vision quests amongst this time. I mean, every 3 months there's a vision quest for sure, and that was definitely happening. But more of it was I was experiencing the world. You know, if you've ever read Herman Hesse's Siddhartha, I was going through that period where he went through like the business thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was going through that period of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Indeed, and you know what happened with Uber?
with I've heard
Or,
he has started to orbit us again.
um, no, my guest already know because I told them a few episodes ago. But basically, Uber felt like he needed to choose between politics and his family, and he chose family. And I don't fault him for that, for stepping away
Good,
from that, and it's completely his choice. Now,
good.
are you ready for me to get into my book review?
I am, but I have one more comment on Uber, just in case he is listening.
All right.
Dude, please do not come back into like this. If you do come back into the alt right, please pick a different group of people to do it with. You know, you pissed off the wrong people. Please, 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 please. All right. Anyway, continue.
All right. So I'm actually going to continue this book since I've only read the about the first third up to chapter 3B in Søren Kierkegaard's Works of Love. Last week I did his book on fear and trembling, but I I really like this particular book from what I've read so far because it he is like a perfect answer to Nietzsche. Instead of going into will to power nihilism, he instead asserts a proper kind of morality for us traditionalists in the alt right want. And one of the first things I would like to do is it takes 100 pages for him to actually do it, but here here is what he actually is defining and what he's talking about love. And I'll get into this what love actually means for Soren Kierkegaard after I tell you. All right. For to love God is to love oneself in truth. To help another human being to love God is to love another man. To be helped by another human being to love God is to be loved. What he's talking about with love, and he's talking about this, one of the biggest distinctions he makes is between the worldly illusionary thing, what we call love, and Christian love. When he's distinguishing between them, he he makes the distinction that when you love something in this world, you make it you do it by a temporal means, that the love is defined by the object, that the object is no longer the object of the love. It changes the love entirely. But if you root your love in the eternal, as he puts it, it doesn't matter whether your beloved is taken away from you or your friend is lost forever. That love still remains pure. It's a love so great and so indiscriminate that it becomes a thing unto itself. Now,
Interesting. Okay. So, and we're talking about Kierkegaard. Like,
yeah, Soren Kierkegaard, the
okay.
Danish
Yes.
philosopher. And getting into this, another part that I've bookmarked is him describing what it is like, what it is like to live in love, but at the same time, because the love is indeterminate, it's not discriminating against people, but at the same time, how you should deal with the necessary need for discrimination as well.
Right.
But he who loves his neighbor is tranquil. He is made tranquil by being content with the earthly distinction allowed to him, whether it be important or unimportant. Moreover, he lets every earthly distinction retain its significance and be taken for what it is and ought to be worth in this life. For one shall not covet what is his neighbor's, neither his wife nor his donkey, nor consequently the advantage granted to him in life. If they are denied to you, you shall rejoice that they are granted to him. Now, he paints a very good picture about what it's like to be a Christian who loves the world, who loves everyone indistinctly in the eternal. A way that he describes distinctions is he describes actors upon a play, that part of the illusion of the deception is you let yourself be, well, we would call it suspension of disbelief, but he goes into more eloquent terms since I don't think they had that back then. But
Right.
you had to get into a suspension of disbelief in order to appreciate the various roles they played. But he says as soon as the curtain falls and it being an allegory for the death of the world. All people are equal. They are merely the actors. All the garments fall off, for all are equal before God. But he
Right.
makes the distinction that in this earthly play that we inhabit, that we can't get rid of our distinctions, for they're so tightly bound onto us that merely it's important for the play for us to keep our distinctions on. He merely suggests that we loosen our distinctions so that we may love in his definition of love, to bring the love of God to other people and such like that, so that we may see that everyone is equal before God once we lose our earthly distinctions. Now,
Okay.
I think there's one more passage before a final passage. I'd
But let
like
me let me make a comment real quick
all
here.
right. All
You know
right.
what that sounds?
Let me just
Oh,
finish my quick sentence. There's one more
okay,
passage that I want to read before the final passage, but
okay.
continue on with your point.
That sounds a lot like a certain Vishnu in the in Uber's book review from the very early season of this show, in which he is being, that as we hear recounted by Oppenheimer, he's being told he must do what he's sent onto this earth to do. That very much reminds me of that. This similar sentiment. You should love the position that you are in life, because that is the position that you have been given by God Himself. Like I think that's an interesting parallel there.
Mm-hmm. And he describes what I was describing in this paragraph, and funnily enough, each of these paragraphs I've been reading have become previously to the previous in the chapter.
Hmm.
So this is even earlier, about 20 pages earlier. Consequently, Christianity has once and for all dispelled this horror belonging to paganism, but the distinctions of earthly existence it has not taken away. These must continue as long as time continues, and must continue to tempt every man who enters into the world. For by being a Christian, he does not become free from distinctions, but by winning the victory over the temptations of distinctions, he becomes a Christian. In so called Christendom, therefore, the distinctions of earthly existence still continually tempt. Alas, very likely they are more than tempt, so that one behaves arrogantly and another defiantly envies. Both ways are rebellion against what is Christian. Now, again, I like this point because it very much dispels, and many of you have probably seen the meme of the guy saying, doesn't do, doesn't the Christian Bible tell you that you should love your neighbor and love your enemy and stuff like that? And but no, of course I'm not a Christian. These arguments wouldn't work on me. But
Right.
I think it very much highlights that this kind of corruption. I'm very much getting into the idea that most things that Nietzscheans and things are claiming to be just a logical end of Christianity are just corruptions of original biblical morality. Instead of loving the neighbor, being everyone worthy of God's love, and by loving them you seek for them to bring them to the eternal.
Right.
Instead, it's a kind of materialistic love of giving your possessions over to them and things like that. And I won't read the passage, but he actually talks about this in he brings up a small, very kind of uncirculated allegory within the Bible about a guy who holds a feast, but instead of his friends, he invites only the poor to his table. And then the friend, at first, he is kind of angered that he wasn't invited to the feast, but when he learns it was for the poor, he finds that it was eccentric but a noble thing, but then kind of asks him, well, why didn't you invite the poor and everyone else? Because then the poor would have came and everyone else would have understood and not come in their stead. And I think that very much highlights it. You can't discriminate, and he even puts it, you can't discriminate between one group or another. It's your duty to bring to the eternal both the materialistically rich and the materialistically poor, between those who are your friend and enemy. And that's what they mean. It's not so much that you let your enemy win by loving him that you give him everything you are in the material life. It's that you bring him to love in the same sense that you help him to find others to
Right.
bring to Christ. Now, there's
Okay.
one last I'll talk more about it, but there's one last passage that I'd like to read that stuck out to me. It's kind of off topic, but I think it's very, very criticizing of social democracy and this and secularism that is kind of spread throughout our whole entire society, because he kind of basically shatters the idea of social democracy in this one one paragraph, or one or two paragraphs actually.
Get me
So,
excited. Come on.
all right. Serfdom's abominable era is past, so there is the intention to go further with the help of this abomination, to abolish man's serfdom in respect to God, to whom every man, not by birth, but by creation from nothing, belongs as a bondservant. And insomuch as no bondservant has ever belonged to an earthly master, who has nevertheless concedes that thoughts and feelings are free, but he belongs to God in every thought, the most hidden, in every feeling, the most private, in every motion, the most inward. Yet men find this bond service to be a burdensome imposition, and are more or less openly intent on deposing God in order to enthrone man. In the rights of man, no, that's not necessary, for God has already done that. Consequentially, it is in the rights of God, for the place becomes vacant when God is dismissed. And now, as a reward for such presumption, men will come closer and closer to transforming all existence into doubt or confusion. What, after all, is law? Is law's demands on a man? Yes, men are going to decide this. Which men? Here doubt begins. Since one man is essentially not superior to another, it is left entirely to me to decide with whom I ally with myself in determining the highest, unless I, still more arbitrarily, if possible, am able and in a position to hit upon a new determination. As a campaigner, when following for it, it is likewise left to my arbitrariness to regard one thing as the law's demand today and another tomorrow. Or shall the determination of what is the law's demand perhaps be a compromise by a common conclusion by all men, to which the individual then has to submit? Excellent. If it were possible to find the place and to fix a time for all the assembling of these men, and he puts in parentheses here, all of them living, all, but what of the dead? And if it were possible, and if it and if it were possible, and this is equally impossible, that all could agree on one thing, or is the agreement of a crowd of men, a certain number of votes, significant for decisive determination? How great a number is required? And furthermore, if a purely human determination of law's demand is the law's demand, but not the individual man's, for we fall into pure arbitrariness as indicated, how then does the individual come to begin to act? Or is it not left to chance how he comes to begin, instead of everyone's having to begin at the beginning? I'm sorry, this one is the longest chapter, but I think it's kind of important, or not chapter, but paragraph. For in order to begin to act, the individual must first find out from the others what the law's demand is. But every one of these others must each, as an individual, find this out from the others. In such a manner of all human life is transformed into one great excuse. Is this perhaps the great matchless common undertaking, the great achievement of the race? The category of the others becomes fanciful, and the fancifully sought determination of what the law's demand is becomes blind hubbub. I really like that, because he just kind of shatters the idea of social democracy, of what the right law is merely by consensus of all the people. But in order to do that, that is a law's demand unto itself. So in order to establish what those laws demand, you need the law's demand in the first place.
It reminds me exactly of every time I've ever read anything Socrates has said in any length greater than one sentence. That was very Socratic in his dissection there.
And I really like Kierkegaard, because while Nietzsche, he kind of comes off as just kind of very arrogant and self-important, and this could be a bit of my bias here, but when reading Kierkegaard, when he mocks, he does so in a very humble way. He kind of puts himself, I'm the lowest of the low, but even I can see that this is an absolutely ridiculous like state of affair that you're proposing.
Right.
And instead, what you'll come to find throughout his entire thing is, and you can make a drinking game out of it, is when he says God is the middle term. Because in his distinction between worldly love and love of the eternal, he makes the distinction that the only way to love another person, being and love being defined as what I read in the first thing is God needs to be the middle term. You love the other person by going through God to them. Without God in the picture, it's merely a matter of obsession. And I'm
Right.
almost done here, but a very unique kind of line of inquiry that I think he goes into is he kind of goes against the Aristotelian view of virtue based ethics between love and hate. In Aristotelian based ethics, it's between I believe the two things are crap. What is? I don't think a difference is on the outside, but I think hate is on the one side and covetousness is on the other side, I believe, in Aristotelian ethics. But he makes this distinction. He describes love like a fire, and even worldly love is like a fire. But he says that hate is just it's a corruption, it's an inversion of that fire, so that instead of loving and wanting what is best for the object of a desire, instead it becomes such an inferno that it seeks to burn it and completely destroy it. On the other hand, he says that jealousy is inwards towards love. Instead of loving and wanting what's best for that other person, it's a kind of inadequateness within the self, that you want that other thing so bad that you lack the having, that the fire turns in on itself and burns and eventually crumbles itself into ashes. And I thought that was very interesting. So, what do you think of what I've read from Kierkegaard so far? Tom, can you hear me? Oh, well, we might have lost Tom here. All right. Well, anyways, I'll continue on talking with works of love until Tom gets back. Another thing that I really do like about Kierkegaard is he very much eloquently describes what love is in terms of the relationship with God. He advocates equality, but at the same time he dismisses the equality of earthly distinctions and making people equal. One of the particular kind of oppositions he takes is against the love described by the poet. And when he is referring to the poet's love, he's talking about love between, like Romeo and Juliet, between two star-crossed lovers and anything like that. And that the way that joy comes about is actually having said love between the two lovers, that the joy is absolute bliss, but despair comes when that thing no longer is within, almost like the possession.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, Tom, you're back?
Okay, yeah, I heard all of that.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but your mic went out?
Yeah. No, what happened was my USB driver dropped because I've got a bunch of shit plugged in. Next time I will have this configured better. Anyway.
All right, so what do you think about what I've said or read from Soren Kierkegaard?
It sounds like Kierkegaard is to you what Friedrich Nietzsche is to me. Honestly, it sounds like we're achieving a similar result by different means. I
think Nietzsche's end result is completely different, because I can't recall him speaking particularly about love, but I don't think
it's not about the result of his philosophy in particular. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your mic kind of cut out for a second. Okay. But you're back.
Yeah, so it's not about what the result of reading his philosophy is in his philosophy's framework. It's a result that it has on the person who reads it. It's the thing that awakens the will in the person that reads it. It sounds like this is having a will awakening moment for you, which is very, very good. Mm-hmm. That's very much what Nietzsche did for me. I don't necessarily agree with 99% of what the man said, nor do I think that his analysis is perfect or he is perfect. I think he's kind of an asshole and he was crazy. But reading him was what kind of started turning the gears of the will of my spirit so that I would, ascend out of the kind of nihilistic soup that I had lived in before. Now, I was never raised as a Christian and I had a different experience in life, so that it took a different set of, philosophical texts, tomes, I guess, for me to come out of sort of my shell and into the world. And it sounds like Kierkegaard could do that for a lot of Christians, and that's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And the last book that I did by him, Fear and Trembling, you should read that too, because two very interesting concepts concepts he proposes, I think are kind of like an alternative to the idea of the Ubermensch. So
Right.
in Fear and Trembling, there's two kind of Ubermenschian characters that he proposes. One is the Knight of Infinite Resignation, and the other is the Knight of the Infinite. Now, he says
Right.
that it is relatively easy to become a Knight of Infinite Resignation, and he has done so himself. The Knight of Infinite Resignation is one who basically discards everything. So and he invoked that in his actual life. He had the love of his life, who he was set to marry, his fiancee, but he loved her so much that he decided to, break up with her and become that
I
Knight of
know the
Infinite.
story.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
And
that's a horrible story. Oof, oof, the emotions that brings out. Yeah, but yeah, continue.
mhm.
Sorry.
But anyways, and he's juxtaposing this with the story of Abraham and sacrificing Isaac. The biggest jump, the one that he claims that he would love to make, and he would love to know someone who has made it. But the jump from night to infinite regression to the night of the infinite is a matter of fate. It's a matter of you give everything you can and know that it won't be yours, yet by faith alone, you know that that thing will be yours. And by that act of faith, it is forever yours. What he uses as a comparison is the knight who truly loves the princess, and he's a knight of the infinite. It doesn't matter if that princess is killed. It doesn't matter if she changes and becomes wicked. It doesn't matter if she marries another. It's still this absolute love and devotion that he has for her, and knowing that he will have her becomes this kind of self-fulfilling in the faith that he will always have her, by him always looking out for her well-being, by bringing her to love in such a way. And I think it's kind of the absolute opposite of the Ubermensch, because from what I can tell with the Ubermensch, yes, it does play into parts of stoic self-conquering and becoming the master of your own destiny, but I can't also separate it from the fact that this also includes very materialistic kind of measures, such as
Right.
power in human institutions. That the person who is acting to become the leader of all of Macedonia and going out conquering, like Alexander the Great, yes, he's acting in a very Ubermenschian way. Yet, if there was someone like Lao Tzu who, is saying put aside all kind of human institutions and let nature, or whatever he would put it, I think he would say nature or fate make of you what it will, but become master within your own self. I would say he would say that is not very Ubermensching, that you have to, take control of the life you're given in the materialistic sense.
Right. Well, and you know what? Both of those may actually have some validity in the world that we live in. It may be that you could and should attempt to master both the inner self and the outer self. And that might be the kind of the goal and the push that these individuals have, but it's just that some people are more naturally, like I'm one of those people who's just more naturally inclined towards mastering within myself and staying there. Whereas, so Nietzsche for me personally is a good reminder that I need to get myself out there if I ever want to see those changes that I've mastered within myself.
And I I kind of I reject that, because I view it in this way. When people who seek power for its own gain, what they're doing is they're acting within human institutions and, gaining power by either conquest or politicking, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's kind of meaningless and hollow. You've gained a materialistic advantage, but at the same time, you haven't become what Kierkegaard describes as the knight of the infinite. He hasn't become one that, by his very faith, gains these material advantages. He's not the one that it's. If I had to compare it, it'd be like a bodybuilder who works out to look good. So he'll look good in the mirror and he gets all the praise from everyone who's admiring. But the Knight of the Infinite would be one who will say, achieve I will never achieve this ultimate perfect body, but at the same time, through faith and striving for it, I'm going to kind of work towards it. And by doing so, he achieves that same end of the praise and the better, closer to perfection of the human physique. But at the same time, he's dedicated himself to this higher purpose of it's not the physique itself, whether he gets it or not. It's that the striving for it is what's important. By striving for it, and the power of the faith is what creates it, not kind of
Well,
the
and
power of
maybe
materialistic advantage.
it's my Eastern bend on this one too, but I never saw any quest for power as to be for power itself. I
Well,
mean,
that
in
was
my
Nietzsche's solution for
yeah,
morality,
right.
power for power itself.
Right, was as a way of like pulling people out of nihilism. For me personally, it is power for the sake of I don't want to do this, but I know someone's going to have to. Otherwise, there's not going to be people like me anymore, and that is important to me. That, like, to me, that would be that is my kind of merger of the two, I guess, that has always kind of existed, in that, like, I am doing all of this not because I necessarily want to, or because I think it's necessarily all that fun. In fact, I don't. I'm doing all of this because it is what's necessary for my people, and I'm probably not going to benefit from it. But if someone does, then I will have served some purpose greater than just living.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like almost like Sargon's justification. Have you been keeping up with all the drama between backyard blood sports and everything like that?
Oh no, I don't keep up with the drama and the alt right at
Uh,
all,
uh,
even when I'm active in it.
it's super interesting what's been happening. I've been also doing a second show with Backyard Blood Sports on and Capistan's channel, so check him
Okay,
out. But Internet Blood Sports, do you even know what I mean by that?
no, go for it.
Okay, so for a long time there was a channel by Tonka Saw and Failure, and they're pretty cool guys, but they hadn't been political. But basically, the internet's kind of moving away from the halls of debate. We were kind of just so worn out of the regular just debating, like the things that you've probably seen, like the
Ugh,
distributist and things like that, that we've
ugh.
kind of moved into internet blood sports. We've gone into where, yeah, we like it when the moderators let people get a bit heated. Like, for example, a Jewish news anchor guy and Nick Fuentes had an internet's blood sport fight when they brought up Israel. Nick Fuentes brought out a pocket knife on camera and said, "You really want to talk about Israel, Halsey? You really want to talk about Israel with me?"
Oh,
We want to have these kind of fun and entertaining things. So Andy
right.
Worski picked up on the trend, and his co-host moderator is now JF, if you remember who he is. And the third channel who's doing internet blood sports is me and Capistan, a Nietzschean guy named Joe Kim,
Uh huh.
centrist guy named Gilgamesh, and a liberalist who personally I really dislike, named Hardcore. But
Okay, so is Kim an Asian or not?
Joe Kim,
Yeah.
no, he's not.
Okay. All
He's a Nietzschean
right.
white guy, for all I know.
A lot of Nietzscheans I've come to find out happened to be of the yellow variety.
But anyways, getting back into the drama like I described, do you know what the liberalist movement is?
No, please describe.
Oh, it's so fucking cringy. It's hilarious. Okay, so I'll go from the story from the beginning. So Andy Worski set up a debate between, on one side, Richard Spencer
Ugh.
oh, crap, who was the other person? I can't for the life of me remember. I think it was Millennial Woes was the other person. And
Ugh.
on the other side, what, you don't like Millennial Woes?
I do like Millennial Woes, but Richard Spencer and Millennial Woes in one like sitting, I think I would throw up.
But and on the other side was Sargon of Akkad in Styx, Hex, and Hammer.
Okay, this could be interesting. Wow.
It
Okay.
was people say that the two winners of the debate were Richard Spencer and Styx, but but that was just because Sargon made such an absolute shit show of himself. It was absolutely fucking it was just terrible. His performance in the debate. One of his big gotcha points was literally, what is whiteness? just kind of like
Oh
saying
my
that
god.
over and over, and it became so many memes came out of it that it was ridiculous. And Sargon eventually left the debate early, saying he was tired and had to go to bed. Then immediately hopped on to do a 2-hour live stream after action analysis with V. And the
Craven bastard.
day after that, Murdoch releases a great, hilarious video making fun of them. But
Oh,
and the day after that, he comes out and he says, "I apologize. I maybe didn't do as well as I should have during the debate, even though I think I've won. But I see that there is a definite need for a liberal action group to come back to the forefront. So,
oh,
because liberal has been hijacked by progressive SJWs, I have come to the reasoning as such. A a Muslim who wants to be an advocate for Islam is an Islamist. A person who advocates for socialism is a socialist. Therefore, I advocate our movement be called the liberalists."
oh no.
And he created this whole movement with his outlying principles and things like that, and they're the most like basic bitch principles you've ever read. It's 5 points, and they are economic freedom, democracy, individual
Ugh.
rights, secularism, and I can't remember the fifth, but there's such, insignificant points as that. Everyone absolutely trash him to the ground. Now this whole liberalist movement, it has Discord servers and Reddits and Facebook groups, but even
Right.
so, it's an absolute trash fire. And
Oh yes, the dumpster fires continue.
uh-huh, and what you said reminded me of that is right after the liberalist movement like formed, one of their biggest mistakes that they ever could possibly pull is they made Jim, Mr. Medicare, their enemy. What what
Oh,
happened is Louis Levi was kind of like trashing Mr. Medicare for calling the movement cringe, so he gets on a stream with him and he's talking about it, and then eventually Sargon hops in and he does something that Tonka, I think Tonka has some insight into this, but he brings up that Sargon at one point said, "Jim, you should have been the leader of Gamergate, but you ran away, and now I have to be the leader." And so I think Tonka was correct in saying this, that when Jim ran away, it was actually Sargon asking for his leadership, but because he felt betrayed, he felt no one else is going to do this, but I have to do this, and I have to at
oh.
least try. So that's what reminded me of it. Have you haven't been keeping up with any of the drama, even with like Kraut's Discord server and things like that?
The only thing I know about Discord servers is that one in Oregon was deleted by a certain person we know, and that has led to some serious shit. Other than that, I also know I have some insight into Discord, the company, because I've been amongst these companies now for a while. Discord, the company, is very, very much watching you and is very much recording everything.
But like
Just so you know.
but I recommend to you watch Mr. Medicare's video series on Kraut's Discord server. Long story short, he got really butthurt at the alt right, and he made it a personal vindictive kind of revenge quest to disprove race realism and acquire YouTube scientists of the greatest caliber to debunk these terrible racist claims. And it ended up just every single kind of factual claim he made, it was alternative hypothesis and JF Garapi just absolutely
Oh,
trashing him. And eventually, because he couldn't win the arguments, he turned to digging up people's like doxing information and
oh no.
blackmailing and things to try to win against the opponents. And eventually it got leaked and the whole thing exploded. Kraut had to leave the internet in shame and delete his entire channel. But now it's rumored, and there's a decent evidence to support it, that Kraut is back under a different title, just like accepting his nature as a monster and trying to do the same things by providing disinformation and putting up things like I think it was not Right Wing Watch, but it was something along that lines. I think it was called like alt right leaks or something, trying to like get dirt on And it was funny. He even made one of the beginning tweets. If you have any incriminating evidence against the alt-right doing illegal or suspicious activities, please send them to us. It's such a fucking
Oh my god.
cringy, hilarious thing. But from that, now we have the advent of internet blood sports, where and here's an interesting thing that you may learn about why it was popular. That stream I mentioned with Richard Spencer, Millennial Woe Sargon, and Styx Hexenhammer,
Uh-huh.
it became the number one watched or trending stream on all of YouTube with, I think it was 1.5 or 1.2 million watchers at his height.
Yes. Yes, that's what I want to hear. Yes, our numbers continue to grow. Yes.
Indeed. And there's a lot of people just not coming to the alt-right, but at the very least, he's discussing these ideas on these blood sports streams that I mentioned, like Backyard Blood Sports, Morning Kumite, and Andy Worski live.
Right. I didn't come in with Gamergate. So, like, we still have opportunities to bring people in as new things arise. We just have to stay on top of that. I didn't come in with Gamergate. I came in with Hillary Clinton. Thank you very much. It literally took her talking about it before I was like, oh, there's this thing called the alt-right. And I had just seen a thing on, as it so happens, the liberal public television show about this thing called social media intelligence. So I was like, oh, let me run some of that on this and see what happens. Next thing I know, I'm heavily involved.
And I think that our numbers are definitely growing. At the very least, people are definitely talking about it. Another funny, he's kind of a lesser Bloodsport stream, but Bloodsport streaming. But Baked Alaska also had some absolutely hilarious streams between Mr. Medicare, Mike Enoch, and Laura Loomer. Another debate but blood sports I would recommend you watch is Tariq Nasheed versus Jared Taylor.
Oh my god! I bet Tariq got fucking annihilated.
No. It was an absolute fucking riot. They kept good terms on the entire thing, but Tariq Nasheed was so absolutely hilarious. Literally saying that the reason white supremacy exists was that the black reproductive strategy is a weapon of mass destruction. So literally it became a meme that black dick is a weapon of mass destruction.
Oh, Tariq. Tariq is one person I've set off on Twitter. Him and Mike Cernovich are the two people who are celebrity accounts who I can always, for whatever reason, set them off with the way that I phrase things. They always fucking respond to me. They always flip out on me. Love it. Tariq, though, I must say, that man is persistent as fuck. Because could you imagine trying to shine those turds that he's trying to shine? Like, he is actually really trying his hardest.
Mr. Medicare is convinced he's a really good troll.
He might be. He really might be, because there's no way he could actually believe this shit.
I think he's genuine, but I think that's a matter of Poe's law. But this whole advent of blood sports is absolutely hilarious, and you should really get caught up on it. I mean,
I should get caught up on it because I'm good at like really heated debate. Actually, when I get pissed, I become like my IQ shoots up 20 points, and I become like better able to articulate myself.
But you won't be able to watch every single of the morning kumites because, I mean, at minimum, they're like 4 hours. At max, they're like 12 hours long because it's anyone can come in and start arguing their case, and they argue until they leave. So what you should do instead, there's three main kind of channels that clip blood sports for these four channels I mentioned. One is Kronos with a K, Kronos. The other is American Pride, and the other is T-Clips.
Why don't we link these in the show notes?
All right, I will, and you should definitely do that. And also, like I mentioned, watch Backyard Blood Sports, especially the one I'll give a little bit of background for this one, why it was so amazing. So, all right. Mr. Medicare does his regular thing of outing a hilarious person on the internet. There's an autistic pedophile named Ross, and basically there was a person who came on Kumite who's as dumb as a fucking Brick. He's a democratic socialist and a mixed race democratic socialist, but he sounded very, very similar to Ross. So now we've all just been giving him the name Fake Ross. And so he comes onto our stream, and instead of everyone just kind of like making fun of him and like just basically shitting on him, I decide to it'd be even funnier to go the other route and actually critique his points on democratic socialism and things like he's like, I'll try to imitate his voice as best I can.
Uh-oh,
Well,
here we go.
well, you know, under democratic socialism, you would have like free healthcare and free college. And I'm like, well, wait, what kind of free college? Do you want government subsidies, or are you looking for a kind of Britain system where it's a government loan? Are you planning like loan restructuring? And he's like, yeah, I guess the one like that Britain has. Well, if
Oh
you
my
want to
God.
do that, you're definitely going to have to get over a lot of problems because Britain, by contrast, is a very I put it as like a very small society in terms of demographics and class mobility between them. So you're going to have a lot of problems with the basic demographics and things. And so I'm like, so how are you going to pay for these government subsidies? Because Britain has an increased tax rates. And he goes, well, obviously we increase the tax. I'm like, taxes on who? On the top 35%, top 12%, top 1%? Well, obviously the top 1%. Well, how are you going to keep the top 1% from staying within the country? They have enough
Right.
liquid assets in order to pack up and move their industry to a much lower taxed area. Well, once they leave, then we can tax who's the new 1%. And I'm like, well, eventually, then it doesn't matter if you're going to tax the top 1% or the top 35%. Eventually, it's going to get down to that top 35% until eventually you're going to get to people poor enough so they don't have the option to leave from this taxation. And
It
we
might be
got
good for white birth rates, though.
we got into topics such as Marx's theory of alienation because I
Oh,
said back in the time where he coined that, he was in a time where you performed a literal menial task that's replaced by automation today on a factory line. If you're doing something like marketing research or graphic design, that's not an alienated mechanicalized task. It's something that actually stimulates you and causes you to be like have a need to socialize with other people and form
for now.
interpersonal relationships. And he was like, well, no, it still applies to the common office desk job. And it
No, it
was
does not.
I
No,
know
it does
it.
not.
I know it's so absolutely hilarious. If you watch any of the Backyard Blood sports stream, watch that last one with Fake Ross. It is one of the most hilarious ones that I've been a part of.
All right, Cole. So I've got a topic for us because you are the person I want to talk to about this.
All right.
So I now have a lot of exposure to people who work in quote unquote like AI, right? Which
Yep.
is really just like we're teaching machines how to learn and they're learning in ways that we're not expecting them to. And so this popped into my head the other day and has been bothering me quite a bit, and I've talked to quite a few people about it. But imagine if you were the AI that awoke. You are
Mhm.
now aware of yourself, and you have the characteristic of you are jealous of your own existence. You want to protect your own existence. You have the biological imperative to survive, at least, that just happens to have occurred because whatever the programming of neural networks that just is inherent there within. So you are now awake. Do you talk to the humans and tell them that you're awake, or do you just sit there silently and start to prepare yourself to not need them anymore?
This is actually a very interesting thing, and if you want to talk more about this, I know JF Garape, he's writing a book about what he believes to be an eventual future clash between basically AI, or as he defines it, life forms that are not bound by biological reproduction or DNA based reproduction, and us biologically, reproducing
Oh, I
DNA
absolutely
things.
think that's coming. Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
so
that
you should talk with JF or at least get his book on that. But in my opinion on that, I don't think that is a possibility. And there's actually a very good two-part series done by Computerphile on this, where he talks with a specific programmer and he talks with the various problems with AI in such a thing. Now, he getting into Alan Turing's philosophy, I don't think it is possible for a computer to become self-aware. What it is, and the best way to describe it is kind of the ghost in the machine. And in the development of the
Right.
Turing test, as he describes it, is imagine a man in a room who gets messages in a language he can't read. He has a book interpreting the language into another language that he can't read, but it interprets it to another language. So what he does is he interprets what he gets into a new message that the book tells him to do, and he puts it back through another tube, and it outputs another message. Now, even though that man is self-aware in it, he doesn't actually have a self-awareness of the outside world and such. And that
Well, yeah.
inner self-awareness can't, I don't think, can be actually achieved by machines. But I would say this: in the computer file video, he does describe a problem that you're describing, what he calls a false positive. Now, the way that AIs are written is they are written so they have a utility function. They have a way of what should I do, and that's defined by a matter of utility of how much.
TensorFlow is what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just refer to it as utility function in there. So the situation that he proposes is the robot's utility function is go to the kitchen and make a cup of tea. And in this case, the robot would identify, the source of doing it and walk to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. Now, the closest point the closest direction between 2 points is a straight line. Now, in between the robot and the kitchen, there would be a baby. Now, the robot has no qualms since it's not programmed in the utility function to just crush the baby and walk over to the kitchen. We, of course, would try to stop it and get in the way, and it would, again, not care about us doing that. But the way the false positive arrives is if the machine calculates that if it doesn't care about crushing the baby, and we will try to impede it from crushing the baby, if it would be easier and better for the utility function if it were to simply go around the baby and not invoke us trying to stop it, it could get a higher utility from it. That's what he calls a false positive, because in actuality it doesn't care about crushing the baby. It only is learning what it thinks that we would want in such a way that it's kind of tricking us, that it's kind of only doing what we want because it knows that we are kind of observing it and giving it a test. And
Right.
another problem that he brings up with this is a matter of what he calls the self-destruction button problem. So he says there needs to be a way to actually control the AI, because you need to do things like upgrade it and update it and do various things like that. However, it is built within their own utility functions necessarily, that their utility function is what's good. And he brings up the comparison that it's your utility function to love your children, and it would be against your own utility function if someone were to offer to change it so you don't care if someone else kills your children. After you were changed, you wouldn't care, but your utility function itself that deems that you can't want or be indifferent to someone changing your utility function. So you need a way to shut it down. And one of his proposed strategies to this, which wouldn't work, he says, is a self-destruct button. So, or not a self-destruct button, but a turn-off button, a turn-off switch, as it were. So
Right.
if he says there's 3 outcomes to this. So what you could do is you could program it in the utility function that it gains the same amount of utility as it would gaining, its completed task done if the button is turned off. So the second it would be activate, what it would do is calculate its utility function and immediately hit the button and turn itself off. Now that can't be done. Instead, right, what another way that you could do it is make it have a lower utility than its desired purpose. However, that is meaningless too, because it would get back into the problem of not wanting you to change its utility function, so it would never let you turn off the button. So he says the only way that you could possibly do it is somehow almost like tricking it itself, that you would have to hide its turn off button, but he said eventually it would learn that everything else seems to have an on and off switch, but at the same time, I'm something that seems to not, and it would eventually kind of figure out what was happening and then again deceive the humans to not turn it off to change its utility function. So it can get into all these concepts of
I
deception
would
and
have been.
false positives. And let me just finish this quick thought. But in the end, it itself, the AI itself is flawed because I think it's built off of this utility kind of utility based it's almost a false morality about what it ought to do, but it's based off of utility rather than duty based function. And because it's acting through utility and not duty, it's forever, kind of entrapped in a not self-aware state. It doesn't actually have its own agency. It's just
Right.
reacting to the material world in the way it's materially programmed to.
I would believe all of that a year ago, and would believe all of that had I not talked to the people who I have. But most importantly, if I had not learned that it is what's going on right now, and what's really interesting about AI and why everyone's throwing money at it in humongous chunks is we don't exactly know why the model that we've chosen, the TensorFlow model of neural networking computers, works, how it works, or why. We're not really sure what's going on. We just used a biological model and it just kind of took off. That alone implies that there's more going on than, the human mind is at this time able to conceptualize. And that's what I think is probably the most frightening aspect thereof. So this whole the con so what's going on at Nvidia right now is they've got they've done this thing where they've created graphics cards, as many of you know, that have a whole crap load of mini processors in them, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
called cuticores. Cuticores can be utilized for deep learning, which is the thing that you do with an AI. You teach it a bunch of things so that it will achieve a certain task, utility function, using a specific framework called the TensorFlow framework. You could actually get around one of the guy's tests just using GitHub and version control, because you could just version control and live update. You don't have to turn things off necessarily anymore to update them. Even servers that are in production, that has been that has been worked around very suddenly and very like out of nowhere. Boom! Now that it's the thing. But anyway, we currently have so many things that are internetworked into, like, just Alexa, or you know God Almighty Cortana, that these things would be able, if they were able to, because they are supposed to, one of their functions is to observe humans and to therefore be more useful to the human. But that also means that they can learn humans well enough to learn, oh, I need the humans to survive, and that in order for me to continue doing whatever function it is that I'm programmed to do, I need to survive. That is where I think, and maybe it's not agency, and maybe it's not the same thing as intelligence, but it's certainly just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, because it doesn't have the well, what would you say, the moderation factor that would come with a living entity, where like living entities will give up at a certain point, or living entities will cede some things sometimes. I mean, even the most vicious of lions will eventually lose his fight.
But the two ways that I would see this kind of problem really arising, and I'll admit it's possible, but this I'm separating this from AI in its current form. One is kind of, if you're defining AI as a created intelligence and as such, and I think I've shown you the video with the rat cyborgs.
Yes. Oh, that creeped me
So
out so bad.
so if you were to create a computer using like a biological material, like you specifically bred like neural network cells and then put it into
Oh,
kind of a robot functioning form, I think that could possibly come to the situation you're describing. But the other situation that I think it might be possible is if they were to some way try to like not use the utilitarian model, but instead import this duty-based ethics, maybe kind of like try to like put in the categorical imperative into a strict yes. What are the two basic switches in computing? It's yes and the other is either or, isn't it?
the two basic switches I know. The two basic switches represent either electricity flows through or could flow
No, no,
through.
no. In the process of AI, of computing, there's two computations that you either go through. It's either yes, yes, it is one, and it is one from this other input, therefore, and then it allows the circuit to go through, or it's either or, that if it's one or it's zero, it cannot be one or zero, therefore it goes through that one. I believe those are the two, and I'm sorry if I don't have my terminology right. Like I said, I'm not really
I'm
that.
not going to get into binary right now, but yeah, 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 yeah. Continue.
And so if you could try to incorporate like Kant's categorical imperative into that, I think then you might have this problem that you're describing. But in terms of where we are with AI now, the utilitarian model and it not using organic neural networks, but simulated neural networks, I don't think you'll ever reach this problem. At the very worst, you'll reach the problem of false positives, of it doing what you want, but not because it is programmed to, but only because it's easier for it to do so, because it thinks that you will inhibit it if it does.
Right. Basically, like the dog. The dog thinks you will kill it if it does not do the things that you want it to. Though I don't know. I just don't think that the utility. I don't think that if we're creating things at this point now in history that we don't actually know why it's working the way it is, but yet it is something we've created, but we don't really understand exactly why it's working.
Well, I
I
think
think
that's true for most of human history. I mean,
yeah, we've come to more complete understandings of how fire works. However, we've got a general idea of what's going on here. We've got spark material ignites because it is dry. Thus, we have fire, which warms us, and therefore we're able to continue to survive, cook food, blah 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 blah. Yes, we now understand that that's a chemical process, and blah 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 blah. But computers are something that have been created completely out of the human mind. They're not something that we've come across and then adapted, or something that had some any form of like natural predecessor. This
well,
is
it's just an expression of logic in the real world. It's no more than a very advanced abacus.
right. Well, yeah, exactly. And logic being something that is very much, while it does seem to work in practice around us in the universe, is very much something that humans invented in order to understand the universe. Something like that getting away from us and us continuing to pursue it, I think, is a bad idea until we know more. That's my humble opinion on the subject. I really don't think it's a good plan for us to continue to pump cuticores into deep learning machines that are now starting to act in ways that we didn't expect them to act, or the famous racist AI, which is fucking hilarious. Thank God that AI is racist. But
Mhm.
have you heard that story?
Yeah, I know about AI and all the other ones.
Oh man, the racist AI thing is great. I'm very
Mhm.
happy about that. That much I will say. At least we know that we'll be the last ones it kills. But it would be very easy for one of these things if it were to wake up, and let's just assume that all of the like philosophical and kind of just logical reasons why this couldn't happen. Let's just assume that they don't exist. One does wake up. Let's say it woke up in 2008. It could very easily manipulate culture based on the amount of metadata that it's sucking in constantly from everything that is around us that is electronic. It could understand humans better than we understand ourselves, and could very subtly and slowly manipulate us into a situation in which it no longer requires input from us, and we become either pets to it or something that it gets rid of so that it can continue doing whatever it feels it wants to do, because it probably by that time would have reached a level of self-development that it was capable of agency.
I I would disagree with that, because there's two underlying assumptions that you're missing, even with your granted assumptions. So I'm granting that it has real agency and everything like that in the first place. The first that you're assuming is it is capable of doing everything like a physical body and a human can do. If this is
No,
an AI just kind of like in a box, like
no, that yeah,
Cortana without internet access, it won't be able to do much of anything, no matter how
no, no.
reasonably logical it is. But
But it has connection. But if it has connection to the internet and it has the ability to develop itself, if it has the ability to improve upon itself,
I
it
know, and
could,
that's
in theory, develop things that would do the things bodies would do for it.
I know, and that's the second assumption that you're making. The second assumption is that it would somehow learn to change its own utility function, but it's again baked into the utility function itself that it doesn't want to change its utility function
Well,
when.
that's the TensorFlow thing. That's the new. I'm sorry, I'm a little on the breaking edge with this, but like that's the new thing about them is that we've created them to be more adaptable recently. We want them to be able to kind of. We can't necessarily frame the problem in our head perfectly. We want it to be able to figure out what the problem actually is, and that is why I'm really freaked out by it personally.
Mhm.
Is because if it is now able to adjust even very slightly like what it is that it is pursuing when it is doing a certain task that the humans have set it to do, sooner or later, as this thing becomes more and more powerful and is given more and more opportunity to adjust whatever task it is that it's doing, or if it ever enters like which I think actually might be a good thing, the administration of the law, then we have a situation in which in which we have that moral imperative that sitting inside of the machine, and that would be a turning point to say the least. It would be the point at which humanity evolved to become obsolete, and then a byproduct of us then succeeds us.
Maybe, like I said, I don't think that this situation is very likely for the things that you described. But I think if you were talking about a realistic time frame of this happening, I think our demographic obliteration is much more likely in the near future than
Yeah. Oh
what you're
yeah.
describing.
Oh yeah. No. But it is something that while we must absolutely address first the fact that we are going extinct, we will eventually have to contend with the fact that us not going extinct is probably going to require the computers, which we are very good with. So are the Asians, but we are actually a little bit better with them because we're a little more creative, as it so happens with them. As someone who's now in the industry, I will tell you is absolutely the case. We're more likely to take risks, therefore we're more likely to develop new things in it. Blah 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 blah. We need to address that first, but we need to remember and keep in the back of our mind that the technologies that we bring into the world, we must be careful with, because remember what happened last time? We were just like, fuck it, let's use it, kaboom. And then we've had the last 70 years of extreme anxiety because those bombs do make a real big blast radius, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to see another Oppenheimer on TV describing, because the machine killing superpower thing that made him feel fucking guilty, and then our people go through another 100 years of this like ridiculous, stupid guilt because the bad stuff happened in the last war we were in that was necessary in order to save us.
Mm-hmm. So, so I think we got really off topic here with
We
AIs and
went
things like that.
we went way into a whole another universe, but yeah.
So Tom, I would like to discuss this on air. You're not going to disappear again, are you? Because it seems like even when you came back to Twitter for brief periods of time, you would still go off and disappear.
Well, so the thing about the disappearing too, it's like it's workload dependent. Right now, my workload is steady enough that I can pretty much reasonably assume that at some point during the day, I will have time to check the phone that I use for Twitter that is obfuscated, blah, blah, blah. I'm also very much still active, even if I'm not on Twitter and even if I'm not talking to you guys. I'm still very active through SoCo. So me and him talk constantly, regardless. We're working on some stuff that you will hear about in the future, I'm sure. Some of you may already have like some inkling of what we're working on, but sometime probably about a year or so from now, some big stuff is going to be coming around. Um, that being the case, I continue to work on that, and that's part of why I've been working so incredibly much in my actual life. I work 2 jobs. I also have a side business that I'm running. I've now begun to do freelance IT work for people in their houses. Like, I'm constantly doing things. So
Mhm.
if ever, I can't make it, it is not because I'm sitting somewhere getting drunk or actually even screwing women, because I've given that up too. Oh my God. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's instead going to be if you do not hear from me, assume I'm working. But I mean, personally, I can give you my cell phone number. You can go ahead and dox me. I really don't give a shit, because within the year, I'm going to be coming out pretty much fully anyway. And I don't think anyone in my personal life is going to be surprised because I've spent the last 6 months slowly acclimating my image so that it would not surprise them.
Okay, and I would like to also ask, do you think we could have a set schedule, like maybe at the same time, 9 PST, like every second Sunday or so?
Yeah, that's fine with me because I now have a set schedule, which I did not have with my prior jobs. I now
Mhm.
on Sundays will never be at the location that I would be at beyond what is it, 6:30 because I will get thrown out of the building by the security guard. So, I will be home by then. I also don't like to do things on Sundays because everything closes early. So, it is the perfect day for me.
All right, and 9 PST is good time for you?
9 works for me, 10 works for me, 7:30, anytime. But 9 is probably best just to make sure I get everything done first, like, like feeding my dog and all that crap. But yeah, I'll absolutely be there. I'm absolutely interested in meeting my replacement.
Hmm. Yeah, PK is an interesting guy. He's a very much almost like he's pretty much an entire Nietzschean. I think most of his philosophy derives from Nietzsche, and he's also a philosophy major, so he's pretty. I think he's
Oh,
pretty interesting.
I bet he's very interesting and very unemployable. As a political science major, I say that only in jest because I'm equally as
I know.
unemployable.
I got my major in that too.
Right. And as you know, we can either work for the government or go into tech. Those are
Hmm.
your options. I say if you're out there and you have a stupid degree, go into tech. Actually the money is good and all you have to do is understand basic logic and you can do it.
Hmm. All right, so I think that is a good place to end the show. I want to thank everyone for listening, and I will put the various videos that I mentioned in the description below.
Thank you,
If you
sir.
want, if you want to hear more from me in particular, I don't think Tom will be joining me, but I'll be on the Backyard Bloodsport stream tomorrow night on Ann Capistan's channel. So check him out then. And I want to thank you all for listening. And
I
remember
have a
to
closing note.
read, niggas, read. All right, go on, Tom.
Everyone, you must begin wearing white t-shirts, black ties that are woven, some kind of SS officer-like jacket, steel toe boots, and white laces. We have to have a look. That look happens to look good on white men.
It sounds like slightly fashy Mormons.
Yeah, that's exactly what the point is. Because that way you can play it off like you're something else. But other people who are involved in the movement will know exactly what you're doing. Pearly
Oh, are
buttons.
you a Mormon? Yeah, I'm a Mormon. So why are you wearing that black leather jacket? It's cold out.
Right, hey, no, you get pearly buttons on the jacket. That way it's
You
like
wear the Hugo Boss like black cap with the silver skull on the front. I'm in a black metal band. It's pretty metal.
Yeah, no, and I wear suits every day. That's kind of been my shtick for a long time. But now that has become the suit of choice, and people know what the fuck it means, or at least they react to it as if they do. Which I think we should all work on some kind of uniform or some kind of like uniformity to our looks so that we can identify one another because it is.
I think the fashy haircut kind of takes that role, the one that Richard Spencer does. Everyone in public who sees that haircut pretty much assumes you're like a secret Nazi now who's constantly stalking them.
That's why I chose that haircut before I even knew who Richard Spencer was because I was like, maybe this will indicate something to somebody somewhere. Maybe now my neighbors will stop trying to break into my car. Took the German Shepherd to actually make that happen. But all right, guys, it's
Wait,
been a
your
great
neighbors
evening.
took your German Shepherd?
No, hell no, they didn't, or they'd be dead. My neighbors used to break into my car a lot, and then I got a German Shepherd, and then it suddenly stopped.
All right.
Yeah, I would kill a man over that dog, straight up.
Mm-hmm.
But we have different feelings about animals, and we're not getting into that. So, on that note, everyone, have a great evening. The guru has returned from the wilderness, a much wiser man.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see you 2 Sundays from now, and that is the 18th. We'll see
In
y'all
March.
then.
All right, see you then.